So Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth had about what I heard was reportedly about 800 generals and admirals fly into Quantico, which you guys know I'm in the DMV. I've trained at Quantico. I'm very familiar with it. Some people have flown to Quantico in order to be lectured about the issues in the military. They're saying this is pretty unprecedented, having people come from Europe, having people come from stateside, all converging onto a single base, Quantico, in order to be lectured about what the problems of the military are, this new culture, the fact that it's going to be the Department of War. So Donald Trump gave a speech, Pete Hegseth gave a speech. And to be completely honest, I didn't watch Donald Trump's version of this. I didn't watch his speech, but I did watch the entirety of what Pete had to say, the Secretary of quote unquote war, as they wanted to be called, the Department of War, and he would be the Secretary of War. And there were some points in there that I absolutely agree with. Then there was some stuff that I thought was ludicrous. Now, I've seen a lot of commentary on it where people are saying, oh, he said he hates women and women shouldn't be in the military. That's not what he said at all. What he said was, we're not going to lower the standard for combat roles in order to allow women to take the roles in order in like some sort of DEI and inclusivity outreach program, like some recruitment program. We're not doing it. Now, I've heard multiple women in the military, it was a fighter pilot, it was other women say, hey, I take offense to the fact that you're suggesting that the standards were lowered in order to get us in, but that's not the case. That was a direct quote from some pilot that flew fighter jets, right? Some of the other stuff he said in there was like, you're not going to be fat anymore. Everybody from the highest general, a 4-star general, down to an E1 is going to take a PT test twice a year. Obviously, I agree with that. What he said was, let's fashion our units to be something that we would want to send our kids into. Obviously, these people are not going to send their kids into the military. People like Pete Hegseth, they know the gravity of what they're signing their kids up for. They're not going to do that. But they will send our sons and daughters in there if we let them. But I do agree 100% with the sentiment of getting people back into shape, getting them back into a mindset that the military is not a game. Right now, we've kind of like gotten into a lax position, especially after COVID, but we got into a lax position because there's no active wars going on where, like 2001, stuff was ramping up. People are getting ready to get shipped out. We know that the rubber is going to meet the road, right? Even when I got in 2010, and once I graduated basic and AIT, there were people that immediately got deployed. So, 10, 15 years later, we've gotten kind of lax because there's no active engagements. But that doesn't mean that it'll always be as quiet in terms of active conflicts as it is right now. So I do agree with, active PT tests, getting us back into the mindset that this is not a game. You don't just sign up for the benefits. There could be something that you're called to do that is dangerous, and you could be risking your life, and you don't want to put your life at risk. You don't want to put the people that are next to you's life at risk. I agree with that. What I didn't agree with was a statement that he made basically shaming all of the current leadership. He basically was talking about how people have been promoted because of DEI, how the units are lackluster. And that's basically telling every general there, because the generals are the top echelon of military leadership in terms of like directly dealing with the units. He was basically telling them like, you guys are not running your stuff the way it needs to be run. So now I'm telling you by calling you here that we're getting back to a culture where hazing is okay, bullying is okay. We're not going to be looking that deeply into IG complaints because they've been weaponized. That's what he's saying. And I think that it's a misstep from Pete Hegseth. A lot of people are saying that it's a misstep, but I think that it's a misstep because like bullying, though it was part of the military culture, even, when I was in, like when I got promoted to E5, people were thinking that they were going to punch me in the chest in order to like welcome me into the NCO Corps. It wasn't happening. If you hit me, I'm going to hit you back. But that was a thing that they used to do, right? There was a camaraderie, quote unquote, component into being hazed. But that is not the only way that you build a culture. And he's trying to say like, oh, we need to get back to 1990 standards, whatever it was in 1990. And it made me question, is that when he enlisted in the military, or was that when he was, I don't know if he was an officer, if he was a enlisted, whatever he was. But 1990 is a very specific year. And all it could make me think was, oh, this must be when he joined. So he's like, oh, we need to get back to the good old days when you could get your ass whooped by your drill sergeant and basic training. And you could be hazed and you could be bullied, and misogyny was way more rampant and out in the forefront. That's what it seemed like to me. And part of that culture is renaming it the Department of War, like some sort of like psychological trick. And he got up there and what other people described as a pep rally in order to incite these generals to, like, they're going to hype up and go out there and start, doing wall to wall counseling. It's not happening. These people have had careers spanning decades. If they're a general, especially if they're like a 4-star general, they've had careers for like 30, 40 years. They don't need you to lecture them on what readiness needs to look like by calling them all the way to Quantico. You put out a directive, say, hey, this is how we're going to be conducting business from now on. And then you allow your people to do that. That's not what Pete Hegseth did. A lot of older generals, retired generals that have been speaking to the public have been saying this is more like a photo op. They wanted to have some sort of thing where they called the generals in. They were able to get in a room and like look tough on the military. And they didn't. A lot of people in the crowd were unimpressed. Like I said, people with careers that span decades, they look unimpressed by what Pete Hegseth had to say. And in the clips that I saw, like in pictures that I saw, also what Donald Trump had to say. To the point where Donald Trump was like, yo, y'all not going to give me no applause? If you don't like what I got to say, you can walk out and your career be gone. So like they wanted those generals to come there and jerk them off in order to feel good about the direction that they want to take the military in. And at the end of the day, he's the Secretary of Defense. Donald Trump is the president. They do have command authority over the military. So what they say, for the most part, is what goes. But we're not going to start doing this thing where we act like we have all of the keys to the kingdom. We have to lean on our leadership. You would expect that, like, if you have the president or if you have the Secretary of Defense, these people would like elicit trust from the American public. But what you're doing is not eliciting trust. We don't trust that you know where to take the military in the next 3 years and a long-term vision for them over decades. These guys are running the good name of the military into the ground. Trump trying to deploy people into all of these different cities. Pete Hegseth, he doesn't have like the first idea of how to practice OPSEC. Dude's texting people on the Signal chat, adding people in, journalists, and then claiming he didn't do it when there's evidence. Like, these people are incompetent, and these are the real. There was a part in Pete Hegseth's speech about how we're no longer going to be promoting people to fill quote unquote quotas, with no evidence that there was actually quotas. Because Axios reached out, they said, "Hey, can you provide us with any evidence of like memos or any paper trail that shows that we were trying to fill quotas in the military back since 2015 over the past 10 years?" No response, right? So if there's really anybody that is hired off of DEI, it's Pete Hegseth himself. Underqualified, incompetent. He's a great speaker. He got up there, didn't have a lot of pauses or anything. He's honed those skills over at Fox News. But in terms of what he's been called to do with commanding the largest and most powerful military on the face of the earth, it's not a job he's really equipped for, if we're being completely honest.